CX Today audience, and welcome to this, the second in a series of DEI-focused panel debates featuring members of the Women in CX community. I'll be your host, Clare Muscutt, the founder and CEO of Women in CX. And before I introduce my esteemed guests, I just wanted to set the scene for this discussion on Beyond the Code, empowering women in non-technical roles in technology. And that is that women and minorities are underrepresented where it matters most, in positions of power and influence that can shape the future of customer experience. Whilst the business benefits of diverse leadership teams are well known and publicised, a recent study by McKinsey & Company found that women make up only 28% of senior leadership positions in the technology industry globally. But why is that? Whilst the movement for getting more women into STEM roles has made important strides in developing the pool of women who can code, there's been little impact at a leadership level, with only 8% of US chief technology officers being women. But as the majority of conversations about women in tech centre around the technical narrative, could we be inadvertently reducing the potential of greater representation of women in leadership more broadly by failing to empower women who are in non-technical roles to the same degree? Today, I'm joined by a panel of leaders from the Women in CX Inner Circle to discuss how women working in non-technical roles are currently underserved by the Women in Tech movement. This debate will focus on women working in areas like marketing, sales, strategy, business development, customer success and support, where women are better represented, but are still just as often overlooked for promotion. This panel will explore the reasons behind the gender gap, including the lack of emphasis on non-technical roles in diversity, equity and inclusion initiatives, and explore the perception that technical roles matter more. The panelists will discuss how this underserved group of women can be better supported, including through communities, mentorship and sponsorship programs, advocacy for the importance of non-technical roles, and addressing the biases that exist in hiring and the barriers that women experience to being promoted. The panelists will bring a diverse and what will no doubt be a lively, informative discussion on the importance of recognising and supporting women in non-technical roles and how doing so can lead to a more inclusive and successful tech industry. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce my brilliant panelists: Jenny Lewis, Customer Insights Senior Manager at Airship; Ermasali, GM of EMEA at Quiq; Charlotte Kennett, Senior Director for Global Customer Experience at SS&C Blue Prism; and Laura Campbell, Strategic Business Development Director at ASAPP. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
How are you all doing today? You good?
Doing great. Good. Thank you.
Welcome to this very special Women in CX Cross CX Today panel, where we're going to be discussing a super important topic about women in technology who are in non-technical roles. So I think we should just jump straight on in here and get our round of introductions going. So I'm going to start with Jenny, because you're in my top left-hand window. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit more about who you are and how you got into CX and technology?
Hi, Jenny Lewis. I lead customer insights at Airship. I got into CX technology kind of by accident. My first role was in email development, writing Perl code to personalize emails, and kind of worked my way through the years towards the customer insights function. But yeah, been in the space about 15 years.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, Ermasali.
Thanks, Claire. Hi, everyone. I'm Ermasali, and I'm currently the GM of EMEA for a conversational messaging and AI company called Quiq. And I guess I started my career in tech also by accident. I never really thought of this, but my first role was as a management consultant at Accenture. And it wasn't a technical role, but a lot of what we were doing was with call center technology. And so, my very first project was with New York City 311, and kind of set the roadmap for a lot of other 311 organizations. And it was a very technical implementation. So I guess I started out in tech right after undergrad.
Wow, so you've both seen a bit of both sides of the coin, then non-technical and non-technical. And Laura?
Hey guys, Laura Campbell here. I have been in the CX world for about 15 years now. And I started my career way back in the day as a contact center agent. So I was on the other side of the fence from a user perspective, I spent about 7 years in contact center operations, where I was an agent, then a team leader, and then I moved into CX strategy. I then joined management consulting, so helping big enterprise companies to navigate the world of CX and contact centers. And most recently, I've spent the last 5 years of my career in CX tech startups. So selling technology and solutions, but most importantly, outcomes to large enterprises in the contact center space.
Oh, and how awesome to have had that real grounding operationally and how it all works in reality as well on the contact center side. And
Definitely.
Charlotte, last but not least.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the invitation. So similar to all of these wonderful ladies, have done most of my career in and around tech. So started off in the video games industry after my master's degree, did internships also all in tech, and moved from video games to software, and have recently been in this role now for 5 years. But interestingly, always around CX. So my kind of passion core is community management, evolved through customer marketing, and now more CX is encompassing kind of, again, that more traditional CX, VOC, user journeys, community management, and also customer marketing. And at the company I work for today, I head up customer experience, reporting into marketing, which I'm sure is a whole debate in itself. And the company is called Prism. So we do robotic process automation. So we are a technology that benefits CX. Our customers see a lot of benefit in CX, but we are not, it's not our core industry, but a very big part of why we do what we do. But being a CX person in tech, that's why I got the invite for today's chat.
Awesome, thank you so much. So as I said at the top of this conversation in my introduction, that actually women in non-technical roles are feeling pretty underserved by the women in tech movement, because in many cases women in non-technical roles feel overlooked, particularly in diversity and inclusion initiatives that tend to be focused on getting more women in tech. So I just wanted to start here really, and I'm going to ask Jenny first. Why do you think that is? Why are non-technical roles being overlooked by DEI initiatives?
I think it's a problem of scale. So if you look at, I've been on vendor side, at working at a tech platform the entire time I've been in tech, and I think the different departments throughout these companies where I've been, there's different pockets that are highly female, right? So maybe an HR department that's all ladies, or the marketing department has a ton of women. And so when you look at the hiring numbers of the company, we have X percent female, and but that's highly represented in a few departments. But if you look at the more hands-on technical side, it's a lot smaller. And so I think that to me is why the focus goes there, right? Because the more traditionally technical roles, like when I was writing Perl code, I mean, there were not a lot of women writing Perl code or doing solutions architecture, right? Like it's a very, very small representation there. And so if you're trying to deal with like the largest, like the largest stack of issue, I think people focus there. And I'm sure other folks who've been in tech companies for a long time have seen the same thing. It's you see the swings between departments.
But we should, in that case, though, be seeing more women on boards, right? If they're all in these like kind of dominating departments, but we're still seeing a lot of those senior roles being occupied by the guys, right?
Exactly. And what I think is interesting is that even if you look at maybe like account management, for example, you typically will have a lot of women in account management, but then the mid to senior level positions in account management are highly male still. And so you've got, like maybe, we've got 10 female account managers. We're like, that's wonderful. But where's the progression in the career for those women?
That's a really good point. And I think, there's so much focus on the technology aspects. I know, like working in and with technology companies, it's kind of all about the product, and the importance seems to rest and lie in the technical space, doesn't it, in the technical roles. I was wondering, Charlotte, you might have some insight into this about the perception that exists and how we can help non-technical roles matter more. And I think especially when it comes to roles like yours, community and customer experience playing such an important part. What are your thoughts on how we do that?
I think we need to stop associating the term developer with someone who goes in the back and does all the code and the actual creating. Developing a product takes more than just the actual building of the product, and it takes different skill set, different teams that need to break down the silos, and it takes people working together and communicating. What I'm trying to say by there as well is that if the people that build the product are only building it with people that look the same, sound the same, have the same background as them, the product they're going to develop is not necessarily going to serve a solution that is going to be able to appeal to a broader team. I think it's about acknowledging that there are complementary skill sets, they're complementary people with different perspectives and different visions that are able to actually look at broadening how you develop these products, how that life cycle looks, and just really just challenging the status quo and just bringing new people with new perspective into these teams and give them an opportunity to be part of building that. And the building is not just the hard coding, it's the design, and by designing, it's like the journeys, it's the use cases and all of that. And obviously, to kind of answer your question again, is how do we change the perception? It's also calling out elitism. The reality is that people will not want to go and work in businesses or projects or teams where they're going to be the single person out. Diversity calls diversity, and elitism calls elitism. And I think it's really kind of being cycle breakers and willing to look at seeing things and doing things a bit differently.
I was speaking to a member just earlier today, actually. She works in a tech startup that's on its way to scale up. She's the only person with customer experience in her job title and feels completely ignored and misunderstood, and the kind of product centeredness of what's happening and not involving customer insight the way it could. Feels like she's banging her head against the wall, and she's also female.
It's uncomfortable. The thing is, it's uncomfortable, right? Because we're kind of shaking people's perceptions and what they're used to hearing. Again, it's you do what you're used to, and why would someone want to come and question? I mean, I've always done it this way and it's worked great, and I've been able to, earn millions and have a great career. Why would I listen to you who has a different perspective? And it's uncomfortable. And I think people need to realize that, that's the only way forward, is accepting to be uncomfortable every now and again, actually listening to what people have to say.
And we all know that for a fact, diverse leadership teams, diverse product development teams make better businesses, people enjoy working at them more, make better products and services that appeal to more people. But definitely, I think there is a sense of that exclusivity or that elitism, and when everybody looks the same when they're developing products and services, or acts the same, or is in I think the case that we're discussing here, predominantly male at that leadership level, we are really missing a trick, aren't we? Because women think differently, different teams representing places like customer more strongly that are typically more represented by women. There's a real opportunity there. So Ejime, let's just jump into this women in tech question then, around how can women in tech as a movement better support women in non-technical roles? Is there an opportunity there?
Definitely. And I think it starts by what we're all doing here today. I think raising awareness and expanding the definition, to your point, Charlotte, of expanding the definition of a developer, expand the definition of what a woman in tech is. It's not just a woman that's engineer, or a woman that's a solutions architect. Granted, we need more women in those roles as well, but guess what? There's not that many of us in these technical companies, in tech companies in general, right? And I think, to Jenny's point, if you look at the senior leadership levels, there's even less of us. So I think we should start by expanding the definition of what it means to be a woman in tech, by being explicit in including women in non-technical roles. This doesn't diminish the fact that we still need women in more technical roles, but I think we actually can have a win-win here. Tech, women and kind of more women in tech is going to beget more women in tech. To the points that we made earlier, if I'm evaluating a company and I don't see women on the team, I don't see women on the leadership team, I'm not going to feel as comfortable to go to that organization, regardless of if that woman is on the engineering team or if that woman's on the marketing team. Having other people in the organization that look like you help you feel like you can be included. And this is why, you know, someone like me, I didn't actually see myself being in tech because I didn't see a lot of Black women in technology. You know, the stereotype is that it's, you know, tech bro culture. And I didn't want to subject myself to any microaggressions or any sort of macroaggressions, if you will, in those types of environments. But I think if we expand the definition and we actually eat our own dog food here, create more inclusive spaces, that's what we're demanding for, right? So let's start by doing it ourselves. So let's start by expanding the definition of what it means to be a woman in technology, including non-technical roles as well.
Absolutely love that. Here.
Yeah. And it's also, I think that to your point, like there's an opportunity for more collaboration across the companies, right? So if you're including the non-technical people in the conversation, then to Charlotte's point, like defining what development looks like, it starts to become different because you're including different voices, right? If there are never different voices at the table, then the conversation doesn't change.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a bit of a universal problem about women in leadership, doesn't it? Or getting more women into leadership, and where there's a smaller base of women working in technology, the chances of that happening are even lower, aren't they? So being able to Ejimo's point, you know, recruit, hire, promote women from across the organization into what in leadership at a really senior level is often quite a generalist thing, isn't it? It's much less specialist, means a great opportunity to influence long-term sustainability, recruit even more diversity, and create better product services and companies as a result. So moving on from there, I'm kind of hitting into this point now about, we're going to talk more about the broken rung shortly, but what is it that's stopping women getting there? I know that we talked previously about the fact that there's a lot of bias potentially in hiring, a lot of bias in promotion criteria. I know in our previous conversations, we all discussed examples from our careers where we felt this experience. I just wondered what your thoughts were around steps that companies can practically take to reduce or remove that bias for women.
Yeah, I think that there's a real, bias, especially for women, around age, actually. And I think that that's a huge challenge, not just in tech companies, but operating in any company. I think diversifying the hiring line manager decisions and making sure that there's processes to have more of a panel style assessment when hiring and promoting women is really important, because I think it gives other people the opportunity to demonstrate their experience working with that person. It's not just solely down to one individual to make those really important decisions, where I think that's when a lot of women can fall through the cracks, right? If they're working with really senior men in organizations, and there is that kind of microaggression and culture that's male dominated, I think that it's really important to diversify the hiring manager decisions. And just to go back to the point around the age bias, like for women, it's much more of an issue than it is for men. And I think there's often a perception that you either don't have enough experience because you're relatively young, or you end up at a stage in life where you might want to have children, and actually then that becomes a risk too often to organizations as well around hiring and promotion. So I think those patriarchal biases that we see in that mainstream kind of popular culture that men just don't experience as often in the workplace.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of evidence around that bro culture still being really real, though, isn't there? Like, I know I'm speaking to a few women, they mentioned like all of the social events revolve around something to do with sport. There's a lot of relationships get built and discussions happen on the golf courses still. There is this kind of exclusionary, even social aspect. And I think for like networking, even like being able to build relationships, find people who sponsor and champion you, typically is easier if you feel like you relate to somebody, right? But when you're not given that opportunity to even network to the same degree or socialize to the same degree, it's all, and those things are exclusionary of women typically. And I know, Jenny, you just had a baby, haven't you? When they're coming up to 1 now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, my work life is significantly different than it was, right? And I'm lucky to work in an organization where it is phenomenally supportive, right? Like flexibility with my hours, and dealing with daycare transition where we were all sick for 3 months because of all the daycare germs. I mean, it's just like dealing with all of that. I've had support in a way that I couldn't have even imagined, but that's the exception, right? And it shouldn't be the exception, but it is. And it also changes, Laura, as you said, like it changes your way that you're working, right? Like I can't do 15-hour days anymore, right? I have a human at home who depends on me to feed her and clothe her and take care of everything, right? So it just the balance is very different. And there's I think there's a term in the mom space about like default caregiver, right? Where the mom kind of tends to be the one who's taking care of stuff. I mean, again, I'm lucky to have a partner who splits things very well with me, but I think it's just culturally that happens as well. And so when your time is that split, it's very hard to focus on multiple things all at the same time.
And when you think about that bias, actually that actually extends into like sharing roles and responsibilities within a team. And it's like the woman is expected to be the caregiver for a child, the same way that I feel like I've witnessed some women be expected to take notes in a meeting or take actions after a meeting and almost play more of an administrator role in those scenarios. And I think that is something that needs to be challenged a lot more. And fortunately for me in my role at ASAPP, I feel like that is not something that we kind of experience. But I've been in organizations previously, and I've had friends and colleagues who've had those situations, and it's really uncomfortable.
Yeah, this is true.
I'd like to add to that, if that's all right. In terms of the unconscious bias thing, I think that it is everybody's job to really work on their unconscious bias, because women have it as much as men, just because we are so used to see this is what performance looks like. So it's funny, because we are taught this is what performance looks like. We will tend to see performance in men more than women, although we are women. And it does take for us, there's still work for us to do as well, and kind of challenge certain thoughts as well. The narrative and the way the brains work are very different. We like to kind of make sure that what we do, we prove, and we make sure that everything's backing, and we talk kind of at a similar level as to where we actually are in terms of performance. Whereas, men, or people that identify as men, will tend to be more aspirational and more nebulous and more kind of goal driven, whereas again based on performance, and that can then harm perception. So I think it is important for hiring managers and leaders to be aware of that, but also to then train the women or the people in their team to make sure that they know how to express themselves in a way that helps with that, but also to check in with themselves as to, well, why don't we just try and make that person think bigger picture and outside the box? So there's work that needs to be done on both kind of sides of the spectrum.
But just to challenge that slightly, I know, like in my experience though, when you get judged so differently for exactly the same behavior, it's hard, right?
Oh God, I see it all the time.
I remember like having to modify myself so much because I was too much, apparently too much in business. Like, and I was doing exactly the same things that guys were doing, but for some reason in a woman, especially a younger woman, it was just not okay.
Too assertive. You're talking too much in meetings. You're speaking
Yeah,
up too much in
you're
meetings. I mean, it's like,
emotional.
wait a second, but like he did it. So why is it different if I?
Yeah, and being
Yeah.
spoken over, like that used to drive me absolutely crazy. But let's move into kind of more about what we can do to change this. And I think obviously we're all part of Women in CX as a community group who are being brave, standing up, having these kinds of conversations, trying to raise awareness. But what is the role of like things like communities and mentoring programs and schemes that can support women? Like, so we've got women in tech, we know that's very defined, and it's to help women achieve all of those things, but within a technical space. What else can we do with programs like that for women? I don't know, for me, like I'm not a massive fan of the word champion anymore with men, but I know like having sponsorship is such an important thing, and when the majority of the people that you're looking up to in a company are men, there is a huge opportunity there, isn't there, for like us being able to enlist the support of guys as well. And I know like in my career there were definitely pivotal moments where someone stuck out on a limb for me, a guy, and that is what helped me make that next step. And it was in an absence of women being able to do that for us. So yeah, any thoughts? I'm going to start with you there, Charlotte, on the roles of things like communities and mentorship programs for non-technical.
Yeah, and I think looking at kind of my career, it took me a lot of years to actually get to a point where I could see women role models in the workplace. So the first easy 5 years of my career, my managers, my mentors, the leadership, they were all white men. And obviously I had, I was lucky enough because I got mentored and coached by some of them. But at the time, I never thought that I would be able to be a quirky leader or be myself and be in a position of leadership while having a kid. Jenny, my kid's 3, and the germ thing really hit because yeah, I get that. But again, it's only recently that when I had a manager that had kids and a career, that I was like, oh, actually, I could do that. And that is so important to be able to do that. And so it's so important to be able to find people, your village, people that get you, that can kind of help you and mentor you. And one of the first things when I got my promotion last year was to join the Women in CX group, because I needed to find people who I could bounce ideas off. And the ideas are on a professional perspective, like, this is a professional challenge, but also on a human perspective. I opened a thread last month. It's like, I'm dealing with this very difficult person. How can I deal with that? And those are the kind of things you can't necessarily ask your colleagues or your peers. And that's why it's really important to find people that are a bit like you and go through similar challenges, because it just helps validate, it helps build confidence and bounce ideas off. But also coming back to the point that when I grew up in my professional career, I didn't really have people to look up to when I made some mistakes, and I tolerated some behaviors that in hindsight, I'm angry that I tolerated, right? So I feel that it's now my mission and my responsibility to be that leader that I didn't have at the time, and also try and bring up certain of the younger member of my teams. I started mentoring kind of people out of high school just to be able to help them and inspire them to say, it's like, you can actually be whatever you want to be. Don't let gender, cultural stereotypes stop you. Find someone that can help you, hold their hand, and kind of go on the journey with them. So I think it is our responsibility as leaders to do that.
To become the role models and the sponsors and the mentors, and keep putting that hand back to lift the next person up. And Ejime, I just have to come to you because obviously you're running your own community as well. Like, do you want to tell us a little bit more about that and the role that that's playing for women of color?
Yeah, so I started a community called it's not women focused, it's and Black, it's for Black talent and customer success. Again, just as a way to help those who may not see themselves in these spaces know that we are here. And to your point, Charlotte, to kind of extend back an arm to say, this is a safer space to, come and inquire, see what it takes, see what it's like to actually be in these spaces and support each other. We're growing rapidly just because the customer success space within tech is also growing rapidly as companies, especially that are SaaS driven, are focused on retention and recurring revenue. And so, yeah, it's just been an amazing journey to help support Black talent in this way. The last thing I would say on adding kind of like what's required in terms of mentorship and sponsorship. I think that we also have a responsibility to kind of teach and coach the men in our lives, whether they're our husbands, our partners, whether they're our fathers, whether they're our brothers, siblings, to kind of be attuned to this, right? I think it's a little bit of we're talking to each other, we're talking to ourselves, women are aware of this, but how do we make the men in our lives aware and holding them more accountable? I think that we have an opportunity to do that as well.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, there's a limitation to what women can solve alone, because like gender equality is not just a women. Yeah,
exactly.
Even like something simple as like calling things out when they happen, right? Because it like a man might not be as attuned to noticing when like if maybe you have a customer you're working with who will only listen to the men in the room, right? And I mean, which happens, and it shouldn't, but it does. And calling that out, right? Because the other men in the room may not notice, right? They may have a different perception of what's going on, and it might be multi-layered, but pointing that out is, I think, good for the conversation and continuing that allyship, right? And helping them understand what's going on from a different perspective.
I always remember like one of the most impactful things was a guy who called out another guy who started speaking over me in a management team meeting and said, "Hang on a second, what were you saying?" Like when it was just a room full of guys, that will always stick out in my mind. And hopefully all the guys that are listening to this today, because the CX Today audience are very male dominated, will be picking up some of these points too. So yeah, we want you with us, guys. So conscious we've only got like 4 minutes left until we run out of time, so everyone's got to run off to meetings. So we're going to skip through our last couple of questions. Earlier we mentioned the broken rung, and I know, Jenny, you were on an awesome podcast the other day talking about exactly this, that there aren't enough women getting that kind of first step into management, that ultimately over time means that's part of the reason why there aren't enough women in leadership and in technology, where there are less women, full stop, that problem is exacerbated. So what do you think companies can do to help address that broken rung?
So I think there's two parts of it, right? Coming back to the mentorship and coaching that we were just discussing, bringing up the generation that is behind us, right? Because until we have a strong pipeline of female, potential leaders, nothing is going to change. We can't move forward unless we have somebody to come behind us and do what we're doing, right? So we need to build a pipeline. Secondly, mentorship and coaching from the perspective of being okay with promoting your successes. And I think that this is in all my years of managing, what I've noticed is the women who I've managed consistently have a problem with promoting their successes and saying, I did this thing, I did it well. And being totally honest, is something I still struggle with too, right? I think, being part of the women in CX community, and Claire is always like really pushing me to get out there and like promote these things. And I'm like, no, I shouldn't. And Claire's like, yes, you should.
Nobody's going to do it for you, is what I say.
Yeah, exactly. And so, really like encouraging ourselves and all the women that we manage to do that promotion and to own their successes. And finally, I think the other opportunity is more what I think of as like micro opportunities. So stepping back in a meeting and letting someone else do the presenting, giving opportunities to help prepare for executive meetings, giving context and information into the business strategy and the executive insight of what's going on. So anyone who is in a senior leadership position, sharing that insight about how the business works and giving the opportunity for others to learn, that's going to create the opportunity for people to start to move up and to have a different understanding of really, what does it look like to be a director? What does it look like to be a VP?
Yeah, so to learn and be visible. I totally agree with you. We're almost out of time, ladies, because I'm sure we could just carry on discussing this all day, but it's been amazing. So so I guess like it's just a chance to give one final thought. Is there anything you'd like the audience to take away from today? As you may, I'll go to you first.
Sure. I was just going to say, be bold. You know, one example I have, and I look up to Accenture's, at least North America CEO, Julie Sweet, set a bold goal of reaching 50-50 gender equality for her entire organization by 2025.
Great example.
She can do it. She also set a goal of having all managing directors, which is the more senior leadership, of 25% women. She already achieved that goal. Now they set that goal to 30%, right? So be bold and let's do it, right? We don't have time. If we wait until gender equality, we'll all be dead by then. So let's do it in our lifetime.
Absolutely. And according to Jenny's podcast the other day, we're at least 15 years away from it even being close. So with the current pipeline as it is. Laura, your thoughts?
Yeah, at Capgemini, where I was previously management consulting, there was a great women's network there, having regular events and speakers and really creating space for women to network. And I think it's really important in any organization to allow people to lift the lid on how women got there or have done it, so to speak, and also to challenge your inner misogyny, right? Because I think it's really important that just because in the past or even now it's challenging for women to make progress, it doesn't mean to say that we should continue to make it hard for people who are going to come after us, right? And just because sometimes we've had a tough experience or it's been really challenging for us to progress, it doesn't mean to say that we should continue to make it difficult. So challenging our kind of inner misogyny and really thinking about how we can make it easier for women who are going to come after us as well.
Yeah, and every time we stand up and do something like this, I think we're making a stand and doing that already. So final thought from you, Charlotte.
Yes, I think it's a lot around also workplace culture. I know we talked about it quite a lot, but also we're hearing a lot of those big companies, often managed by very similar types of people. Kind of, we have to go back to work, we have to go back into the workplace. Flexible working has been absolutely wonderful to open up the workplace to people that aren't able to travel to offices, and that has opened the workplace up to more people, more talent, more backgrounds, more diversity, should it be on in terms of like gender or neurodiversity. So what I would kind of close off there is just making sure that you keep it open and kind of open to less traditional ways of running a business, of a 9 to 5 into office, because by opening up and offering that flexibility, you're offering up to much better talent, well, not better talent, but broader talent that can really bring a lot of value into your workplace.
Awesome. And Jenny gets close for us.
Yeah, I think continuing to have the conversation, carving out time and just continuing to talk about what's going on. It's easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and like the whirlwind of everything that's happening, but doing things like this and continuing to have the conversation is important, because if we don't shine a light on it, it's not going to change.
Love it. Well, that's it, ladies. Thank you so much for this conversation today. I've taken so much away from it, and it was just an absolute joy and a pleasure and a privilege to spend time with you. So thank you so much. See you all soon.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now.